The death toll climbs to 5 in South African temple building collapse. The death toll in last week's building collapse at the site of a Hindu temple in South Africa has risen to 5, and investigators have launched a probe into the cause of the disaster, authorities said Monday. And you might be thinking, well, Queen, why are you covering this? You see, the news is calling this a Hindu temple in South Africa. However, this temple is actually the Verulam temple, which is a temple in the Hare Krishna cult.
Karma's a bitch.
Queen of Karma.
The Hare Krishna movement, formerly known as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, has long carried the weight of controversy. Survivors and researchers, such as myself, have described it as a high-control religious group, a cult-like organization where devotion is leveraged to demand obedience, labor, and financial sacrifice. From child abuse scandals in its Gurukula schools to financial exploitation and psychological manipulation, ISKCON's history is marked by systemic harm that continues to reverberate across its global communities. Now, in South Africa, those long-standing concerns have collided with tragedy. On December 12, 2025, a temple building under construction in Verulam collapsed, killing several people and injuring many more. This disaster is not only a local catastrophe, it is a stark reminder of how unchecked ambition, negligence, and cult-like expansion practices can cost lives. Founded in 1966 by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, ISKCON spread rapidly across the globe, presenting itself as a spiritual society devoted to Krishna. Yet beneath the chanting and saffron robes lies a troubling legacy, one that I have covered many times in the past. And I even link my past article, Bhakti Vidya Purnaswamy ISKCON and the Mayapur Gurukula controversy, where we deep dive ISKCON, the Hare Krishna cult. Survivors have documented decades of harm, child abuse scandals in ISKCON schools, financial coercion where devotees were pressured to donate beyond their means, and labor exploitation framed as service to Krishna. The movement's teachings often encourage followers to cut ties with outside support systems, leaving them isolated and dependent on temple leadership. Questioning authority is discouraged, dissent silenced, and devotion leveraged to justify neglect. The legacy of harm is not abstract. It shapes the lived experience of survivors who continue to speak out, warning that ISKCON's pursuit of expansion and image often comes at the expense of safety, dignity, and human life. For more information, please do check out my video, Dagmar's Story. Hare Krishna cult survivor shares abuse. On December 12, 2025, tragedy struck in Verulam, KwaZulu-Natal. A 4-story building under construction at the new Ahobilam Temple of Protection collapsed while workers were pouring concrete. Survivors described the deafening sound of cracking beams, the suffocating dust cloud, and the terror of being trapped beneath rubble. At least 5 people were killed, including Vic Pandey, the temple's founder, and many others were injured. Rescue operations were complicated by unstable debris and severe weather conditions. Families gathered outside the site, waiting in anguish for news of loved ones. Local authorities later confirmed the building had no approved plans or permits. What might have been seen as a tragic accident was now understood as a preventable disaster, born of negligence and disregard for civil law. Local authorities later confirmed the building had no approved plans or permits. The, and I'm gonna butcher this, eThekwini municipality stated that no building plans were approved for the 4-story structure that collapsed at the new Ahobilam Temple of Protection in Verulam. What might have been seen as a tragic accident was now understood as a preventable disaster, born of negligence and disregard for civil law. And then I have linked this article. As you can see here, they are saying that they had no approved building plans. Here is a social media post where they say, update on structural collapse incident in Verulam, Durban. 11 individuals, 2 females and 9 males, have been successfully rescued and transported to the hospital for medical care. Sadly, 1 person has passed away. And then it states, the municipality's Gugu Silsilana says eThekwini municipality's emergency services are actively supporting multidisciplinary teams in a rescue operation following the collapse of the temple. 1 fatality and a few entrapments have been confirmed. The incident has resulted in several injuries and entrapments. Preliminary reports confirm that no building plans were approved for the structure, rendering it illegal. The municipality will formally hand the matter over to the Department of Employment and Labor and will continue to cooperate fully with all relevant authorities to provide information that may assist the investigation. For survivors and families, the collapse is not only physical trauma, but also emotional betrayal. Many trusted the temple as a spiritual refuge, a place of protection and devotion. Instead, they discovered that basic safety standards were ignored. Survivors now carry the weight of grief, injury, and the knowledge that their suffering was avoidable. Some describe feeling manipulated into contributing labor or funds for the temple's expansion, only to see those efforts end in tragedy. Others speak of the silence and minimization that often follows disasters in high-control groups, where leaders emphasize spiritual explanations rather than accountability. This is the human cost of negligence. Lost lives, families shattered more, and communities left questioning whether devotion was exploited in the name of ambition. The Verulam collapse reflects a broader culture of expansion within ISKCON, where temples are built rapidly, often without proper oversight. In many countries, ISKCON has pursued ambitious construction projects, framing them as offerings to Krishna or symbols of spiritual progress. Yet survivors and critics, such as myself and Mike, argue that these projects often prioritize image over safety. The pressure to expand, to build bigger and more impressive temples, can lead to shortcuts, exploitation of labor, and disregard for regulations. We've seen it over and over again. This collapse is a stark example of how this culture of unchecked ambition can have deadly consequences. 1 death is 1 too many. The collapse in Verulam fits into a global pattern of harm tied to ISKCON's operations. Child abuse scandals. Survivors of ISKCON's Gurukula schools in the US and India have testified to widespread abuse, leading to lawsuits and settlements. The proof of that is in my article that I showed you guys that I linked earlier. Financial mismanagement. Temples worldwide have faced accusations of misusing donations, with funds diverted to expansion projects or leadership lifestyles. Labor exploitation. In countries from India to the UK, devotees have reported being pressured into unpaid service, often at the expense of their health and livelihoods. And I've covered that in the past. Neglect of safety. Construction projects, festivals, and mass gatherings have sometimes ignored basic safety standards, putting devotees at risk. This collapse is part of this continuum, a reminder that ISKCON's pursuit of growth and visibility often comes at a devastating human cost. But what does this mean for South Africa, yo? The Verulam collapse forces South Africa to confront the accountability gap that allows religious organizations to operate with limited oversight. For devotees, it is a moment to question whether loyalty to a movement should come at the cost of safety and dignity. For the public, it is a call to scrutinize religious institutions accused of cult-like practices, ensuring they meet the same standards as any other organization. For survivors, it is a painful but powerful opportunity to speak truth, demand reform, and ensure that no one else suffers in silence. This tragedy highlights the need for stricter enforcement of building codes, greater transparency in religious construction projects, and recognition of the systemic harms tied to high control groups. This disaster demands more than condolences. Survivors deserve justice, transparency, and recognition of the systemic failures that led to the collapse. Their voices must guide the reckoning that follows. Minister Dean McPherson vowed to reform building regulations after the collapse, explicitly stating the need to prevent future tragedies and ensure compliance. The KwaZulu-Natal government called for a reassessment of building standards, especially in light of climate risks and illegal construction practices. eThekwini Mayor Cyril Zaba expressed serious concern about compliance, denying that illegal construction is widespread, but acknowledging the need for better enforcement. These statements show that authorities view the collapse as a preventable failure, not an act of fate. The absence of approved plans, the rushed expansion, and the lack of oversight all point to systemic negligence, not just by builders, but by those who allowed the project to proceed unchecked. Faith cannot be used as a shield against accountability. The Verulam collapse is both a human tragedy and a cautionary tale, a reminder that devotion must never come at the expense of safety, dignity, and human life. This is a serious topic, but I have to use humor to get me through. The collapse of the Hare Krishna temple in is not only a physical disaster, but a symbol of deeper harms tied to high-control religious groups. Survivors now stand at the center of this story, and their voices must shape the future. This is a moment for South Africa and for the global community to demand accountability, reform, and solidarity with those harmed by institutions that claim to offer salvation while neglecting the most basic human protections. Yeah, I wrote that. This was an absolute tragedy, and my heart goes out to anyone that was affected by this, and rest in peace. But again, this just goes to show you that this is why we need to keep an eye on what the cults are doing, no matter where they are or what religion they're attached to. Because this could have been avoided if we held these cults more accountable. Cults often kind of use loopholes for projects like this, and the Hare Krishna movement is very, very guilty of doing that. Not only with this temple, but with all of their temples. So something needs to be done here to ensure that something like this never happens again. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Hopefully that article will be published soon. I'm just gonna, go over it a bit. I might add some stuff. So make sure you check it out when I do publish it and post it on my community tab in case I added more. I don't know. Some things might get added in the next few days. Give this a like, hype this up. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you all really soon with another one. I love all your faces. Okay, bye.
Queen of Karma.